Notre-Dame de Paris.
Notre-Dame de Paris, also known as Notre-Dame Cathedral or simply Notre-Dame, is a historic Catholic cathedral on the eastern half of the Ile-de-la Cité in the 4th arrondissement of Paris, France. The cathedral is widely considered to be one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture and among the largest and most well-known church buildings in the world. The naturalism of its sculptures and stained glass are in contrast with earlier Romanesque architecture. As the cathedral of the Archdiocese of Paris, Notre-Dame is the parish that contains the cathedra, or official chair, of the Archbishop of Paris, currently Cardinal André Vingt-Trois. The cathedral treasury is notable for its reliquary which houses some of Catholicism's most important first-class relics including the purported crown of thorns, a fragment of the true cross, as one of the holy nails. In the 1790s, Notre-Dame suffered desecration during the radical phase of the French Revolution when much of its religious imagery was damaged or destroyed. An extensive restoration supervised by Eugene Viollet-le-Duc began in 1845. A project of further restoration and maintenance began in 1991.
Architecture.
Notre-Dame de Paris was among the first buildings in the world to use the flying buttress, arched exterior supports. The building was not originally designed to include the flying buttresses around the choir and nave but after the construction began, the thinner walls, popularized in the Gothic style, grew ever higher and stress fractures began to occur as the walls pushed outward. In response, the cathedral's architects built supports around the outside walls, and later additions continued the pattern. Many small individually crafted statues were placed around the outside to serve as column supports and water spouts. Among these are the famous gargoyles, designed for water runoff, and chimeras. The statues were originally colored as was most of the exterior. The paint has worn off, but the grey stone was once covered with vivid colors. The cathedral was essentially complete by 1345. The cathedral has a narrow climb of 387 steps at the top of several spiral staircases. Along the climb it is possible to view its most famous bell and its gargoyles in close quarters, as well as having a spectacular view across Paris when reaching the top. The design of St. Peter's Anglican Cathedral in Adelaide, Australia was inspired by Notre-Dame de Paris.
Contemporary critical reception.
John of Jandun recognized the cathedral as one of Paris's three most important buildings in his 1323 treatise on the praises of Paris.
Construction history.
In 1160, because the church in Paris had become the Parisian Church of the Kings of Europe, Bishop Maurice de Sully deemed the previous Paris cathedral, Saint Etienne, St. Stephen's, which had been founded in the 4th century, unworthy of its lofty role, and had it demolished shortly after he assumed the title of Bishop of Paris. As with most foundation myths, this account needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Archaeological excavations in the 20th century suggested that the Merovingian cathedral replaced by Sully was itself a massive structure, with a 5-aisled nave and a facade some 36 m across. It seems likely therefore that the faults with the previous structure were exaggerated by the bishop to help justify the rebuilding in a newer style. According to legend, Sully had a vision of a glorious new cathedral for Paris, and sketched it on the ground outside the original church. To begin the construction, the bishop had several houses demolished and had a new road built in order to transport materials for the rest of the cathedral. Construction began in 1163 during the reign of Louis VII, and opinion differs as to whether Sully or Pope Alexander III laid the foundation stone of the cathedral. However, both were at the ceremony in question. Bishop de Sully went on to devote most of his life and wealth to the cathedral's construction. Construction of the choir took from 1163 until around 1177 and the new high altar was consecrated in 1182. It was normal practice for the eastern end of a new church to be completed first, so that a temporary wall could be erected at the west of the choir, allowing the chapter to use it without interruption while the rest of the building slowly took shape. After Bishop Maurice de Sully's death in 1196, his successor, Eudes de Sully, no relation, oversaw the completion of the transepts and pressed ahead with the nave, which was nearing completion at the time of his own death in 1208. By this stage, the western facade had also been laid out, though it was not completed until around the mid-1240s. Over the construction period, numerous architects worked on the site, as is evidenced by the differing styles at different heights of the west front and towers. Between 1210 and 1220, the fourth architect oversaw the construction of the level with the rose window and the great halls beneath the towers. The most significant change in design came in the mid-13th century, when the transepts were remodeled in the latest Rayonnant style. In the late 1240s, Jean de Chelles added a gabled portal to the north transept topped off by a spectacular rose window. Shortly afterwards, from 1258, Pierre de Montreuil executed a similar scheme on the southern transept. Both these transept portals were richly embellished with sculpture. The south portal features scenes from the lives of Saint Stephen and of various local saints, while the north portal featured the infancy of Christ and a story of Theophilus in the tympanum, with a highly influential statue of the Virgin and Child in the trumeau.
Timeline of construction.
1160 Maurice de Sully, named Bishop of Paris, orders the original cathedral demolished. 1163 Cornerstone laid for Notre-Dame de Paris. Construction begins. 1182 Apse and choir completed. 1196 Bishop Maurice de Sully dies. c. 1200 Work begins on western facade. 1208 Bishop Eudes de Sully dies. Nave vaults nearing completion. 1225 Western facade completed. 1250 Western towers and north rose window completed. c. 1245 to 1260 Transepts remodeled in the Rayonnant style by Jean de Chelles then Pierre de Montreuil. 1250 to 1345 Remaining elements completed.
Crypts beneath Notre-Dame de Paris.
The archaeological crypt of the Paris Notre-Dame was created in 1965 to protect a range of historical ruins, discovered during construction work and spanning from the earliest settlement in Paris to the modern day. The crypts are managed by the Musée Carnavalet and contain a large exhibit, combining detailed models of the architecture of different time periods, and how they can be viewed within the ruins. The main feature still visible is the underfloor heating installed during the Roman occupation.
Alterations, vandalism and restorations.
In 1548, rioting Huguenots damaged features of Notre-Dame, considering them idolatrous. During the reigns of Louis XIV and Louis XV, the cathedral underwent major alterations as part of an ongoing attempt to modernize cathedrals throughout Europe. A colossal statue of Saint Christopher, standing against a pillar near the western entrance and dating from 1413, was destroyed in 1786. Tombs and stained glass windows were destroyed. The north and south rose windows were spared this fate, however. In 1793, during the French Revolution, the cathedral was rededicated to the cult of reason, and then to the cult of the Supreme Being. During this time, many of the treasures of the cathedral were either destroyed or plundered. The statues of biblical kings of Judah, erroneously thought to be kings of France, located on a ledge on the facade of the cathedral were beheaded. Many of the heads were found during a 1977 excavation nearby and are on display at the Musée de Cluny. For a time, Lady Liberty replaced the Virgin Mary on several altars. The cathedral's great bells managed to avoid being melted down. The cathedral came to be used as a warehouse for the storage of food. A controversial restoration program was initiated in 1845, overseen by architects Jean-Baptiste Antoine Lassus and Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. Viollet-le-Duc was responsible for the restorations of several dozen castles, palaces and cathedrals across France. The restoration lasted 25 years and included a taller reconstruction of the flèche, a type of spire, which was destroyed during the French Revolution, as well as the addition of the chimeras on the Galerie des Chimères. Viollet-le-Duc always signed his work with a bat, the wing structure of which most resembles the Gothic vault, see Château de Roquetelade. The Second World War caused more damage. Several of the stained glass windows on the lower tier were hit by stray bullets. These were remade after the war, but now sport a modern geometrical pattern. not the old scenes of the Bible. In 1991, a major program of maintenance and restoration was initiated, which was intended to last 10 years, but was still in progress as of 2010, the cleaning and restoration of old sculptures being an exceedingly delicate matter. Circa 2014, much of the lighting was upgraded to LED lighting.
Organ.
Though several organs were installed in the cathedral over time, the earliest ones were inadequate for the building. The first noteworthy organ was finished in the 18th century by the noted builder François-Henri Clicquot. Some of Clicquot's original pipework in the pedal division continues to sound from the organ today. The organ was almost completely rebuilt and expanded in the 19th century by Aristide Cavaillé. The position of titular organist, head, or chief organist, at Notre-Dame is considered one of the most prestigious organist posts in France, along with the post of titular organist of Saint-Sulpice in Paris, Cavaillé largest instrument. The organ has 7,374 pipes, with Ca 900 classified as historical. It has 110 real stops, 5 56-key manuals and a 32-key talboard. In December 1992, a 2-year restoration of the organ was completed that fully computerized the organ under 3 LANs, local area networks. The restoration also included a number of additions, notably 2 further horizontal reed stops en camarade in the Cavaillé style. The Notre Dame organ is therefore unique in France in having 5 fully independent reed stops en camarade.
Organists.
Among the best-known organists at Notre-Dame de Paris was Louis Vian, who held this position from 1900 to 1937. Under his tenure, the Cavaillé organ was modified in its tonal character, notably in 1902 and 1932. Léonce de Saint-Martin held the post between 1932 and 1954. Pierre Corot initiated further alterations, many of which were already planned by Louis Vian, including the electrification of the action between 1959 and 1963. The original Cavaillé console, which is now located near the organ loft, was replaced by a new console in Anglo-American style and the addition of further stops between 1965 and 1972, notably in the pedal division, the recomposition of the mixture stops, a 32-feet plenum in the neo-baroque style on the solo manual, and finally the adding of 3 horizontal reed stops en camarade in the Iberian style. After Corot's sudden death in 1984, 4 new titular organists were appointed at Notre-Dame in 1985, Jean-Pierre Legaye, Olivier Latry, Yves Devereux, who died in 1990, and Philippe Lefebvre. This was reminiscent of the 18th century practice of the cathedral having 4 titular organists, each one playing for 3 months of the year.
Bells.
The cathedral has 10 bells. The largest, Emmanuel, original to 1681, is located in the south tower and weighs just over 13 tons, and is told to mark the hours of the day and for various occasions and services, ringing in a resounding E. This bell is always rung first, at least 5 seconds before the rest. Until recently, there were 4 additional 19th-century bells on wheels in the north tower, which were swing-chimed. These bells were meant to replace 9 which were removed from the cathedral during the Revolution and were rung for various services and festivals. The bells were once rung by hand before electric motors allowed them to be rung without manual labor. When it was discovered that the size of the bells could cause the entire building to vibrate, threatening its structural integrity, they were taken out of use. The bells also had external hammers for tune playing from a small clavier. On the night of August 24, 1944, as the Ile de la Cité was taken by an advance column of French and Allied armored troops and elements of the resistance, it was the tolling of the Emmanuel that announced to the city that its liberation was underway. In early 2012, as part of a EU 2 million project, the 4 old bells in the North Tower were deemed unsatisfactory and removed. The plan originally was to melt them down and recast new bells from the material. However, a legal challenge resulted in the bells being saved in extremis at the foundry. As of early 2013, they are still merely set aside until their fate is decided. A set of 8 new bells was cast by the same foundry in Normandy that had cast the 4 in 1856. At the same time, a much larger bell called Marie was cast in the Netherlands. It now hangs with Emmanuel in the South Tower. The 9 new bells, which were delivered to the cathedral at the same time, January 31, 2013, are designed to replicate the quality and tone of the cathedral's original bells.
Significant events.
1185, Heraclius of Caesarea calls for the Third Crusade from the still incomplete cathedral. 1239, the crown of thorns is placed in the cathedral by St. Louis during the construction of the Saint Chapel. 1302, Philip the Fair opens the first States General. December 16, 1431, Henry VI of England is crowned King of France. 1450, wolves of Paris are trapped and killed on the parvis of the cathedral. November 7, 1455, Isabelle Remy, the mother of Joan of Arc, petitions a papal delegation to overturn her daughter's conviction for heresy. January 1, 1537, James V of Scotland is married to Madeleine of France. April 24, 1558, Mary, Queen of Scots is married to the Dauphin Francis, later Francis II of France, son of Henry II of France. August 18, 1572, Henry of Navarre, later Henry IV of France, marries Margaret of Valois. The marriage takes place not in the cathedral but on the parvis of the cathedral, as Henry IV is Protestant. September 10, 1573, the cathedral was the site of a vow made by Henry of Valois following the interregnum of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth that he would both respect traditional liberties and the recently passed religious freedom law. November 10, 1793, the Festival of Reason. December 2, 1804, the coronation ceremony of Napoleon I and his wife Josephine, with Pope Pius VII officiating. 1831, the novel The Hunchback of Notre-Dame was published by French author Victor Hugo. April 18, 1909, Joan of Arc is beatified. May 16, 1920, Joan of Arc is canonized. 1900, Louis Vian is appointed organist of Notre-Dame de Paris after a heavy competition, with judges including Charles-Marie Widder, against the 500 most talented organ players of the era. On June 2, 1937, Louis Vian dies at the cathedral organ, as was his lifelong wish, near the end of his 1750th concert. February 11, 1931, Antonita Rivas Mercado shot herself at the altar with a pistol, property of her lover José Vasconcelos. She died instantly. August 26, 1944, the Te Deum Mass takes place in the cathedral to celebrate the liberation of Paris. According to some accounts, the Mass was interrupted by sniper fire from both the internal and external galleries. November 12, 1970, the Requiem Mass of General Charles de Gaulle is held. June 6, 1971, Philippe Petit surreptitiously strings a wire between the two towers of Notre Dame and tightrope walks across it. Petit later performed a similar act between the twin towers of the World Trade Center. May 31, 1980, after the Magnificat of this day, Pope John Paul II celebrates Mass on the parvis of the cathedral. January 1996, the Requiem Mass of François Mitterrand is held. August 10, 2007, the Requiem Mass of Cardinal Jean-Marie Lustiger, former Archbishop of Paris and famous Jewish convert to Catholicism, is held. May 21, 2013, around 1,500 visitors were evacuated from Notre-Dame Cathedral after Dominique Vedner, a historian, placed a letter on the church altar and shot himself. He died immediately. The cathedral is renowned for its Lent sermons founded by the famous Dominican Jean-Baptiste Henri Lécordaire in the 1860s. In recent years, however, an increasing number have been given by leading public figures and state-employed academics.
Gallery.